Algebra students, it's Miss Stell. I'm coming live from my house. Today's lesson in this new unit is about slope-intercept form, your essential questions, so what you should be able to answer by the time we get done with the video, and then your Math Excel is what information does slope-intercept form of a linear equation reveal about a line? So slope-intercept form is always written as y equals mx plus b. Little information here, m is slope, b is y-intercept, and then of course x is the x-axis values or the independent variable, and the y is the dependent variable or your y-axis values. So x and y always stay as x and y when you write the final equation, because these two, the x and the y, are variables, and so they vary depending on what point in the graph you're looking at. Some vocab words. So if you pause the video and write these down as we go through them here. Slope-intercept form. So slope-intercept form of a linear equation is x or y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope of the line and b is the y-intercept of the line. So exactly what I just talked about. If you want to go back to the first slide and write that example down, or you can write down the example that was in the glossary in Sabas. It's y equals 1/2 x minus y. So this is what we talked about. Remember, in the form of y equals mx plus b. M is your slope, so this is 1/2 here. So slope is 1/2, and b is your y-intercept, and that is -3. It might help to kind of understand slope a little bit more. Slope is the ratio of the vertical change to the horizontal change. So how much a line changes vertically versus how much a line changes horizontally. And that is like the slope of a roof. If you're thinking about a house, you know, this is important to people that are building houses, this slope here is how much it vertically changes or how much it horizontally changes. And that would give you how steep that roof is. Mathematically here, and I'll use this equation a lot, slope equals vertical change over horizontal change. One thing I'll show you or use is the symbol with a triangle, which means change in math. So the change vertically would, of course, be on the y-axis. So the changes of the y values over the changes of the x or the horizontal. We also will use the equation y2 minus y1. Again, notice that's the change. And I use the subtraction idea, so that tells us how much difference there is. That goes back to this change of the y, and then the change of the x values. And again, that goes back to the change of the x. Just so you know, x2 and x1 cannot equal 0. In other words, you can't, just like any math or any fraction or ratio, we cannot have 0 in the denominator. Your y-intercept is the point where the graph crosses the y-axis. So if we're looking at this graph here, if you notice it points right there. So you have a line going through the y-axis. Exactly where that point intersects or where that crosses is known as the y-intercept. So we're going to graph a line from an equation. So the equation in this first example is y equals 4/5 x plus 2. And we're going to take that equation, which is in slope-intercept form, and put it on this graph over here. So my first step, I always say, is to identify the y-intercept in this situation. So if we go back to what is slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. And now we take the equation, y equals, my slope is 4/5 x, and then plus 2. So if you remember from the vocab that b is our y-intercept in their equation format. So b lines up with a +2. So the y-intercept is 2, which means we're going to plot the point 0, 2. So when I actually talk about plotting it, we're going to plot it as a point. So we're going to put it right here at 0, 2. Notice that anywhere, so my y-axis is, or my y-intercept is always going to live here on this y-axis. And notice that the value of x will always be 0. So when you make that point, that x value is 0 because it sits here on the y-axis, and the y value is 0 right here. Second part is we're going to look at the slope, and we're going to use that to plot our second point. So if we remember from our vocab that the slope is the vertical change over the horizontal change. So if we look at the point, remember m is the slope, or the coefficient on the x there is 4/5. Okay, so that means that horizontally it's moving at 5 and vertically we're moving at 4. So we're going to go vertically first and then horizontally. So we're going to start with the point, or the y-intercept point, which is 0, 2. And we're going to move vertically. And notice that this is a positive 4, which means that we move up 4. So we're going to move 4 units up. And this is our horizontal movement. And it's positive, and it's always positive. Just a clarification there. So we're always going to move to the right. So n 5 units right. And that's going to help locate our second point. So let's do that mathematically. So we're going to take and move 4 units up. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to move 5 units right. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So our new point is at, it looks like 5, 6. So our first point, or the y-intercept, was at 0, 2. We've gone up 4 and over to the right 5. So notice if you look at the y-intercept, you think about changing up 4, or the vertical, which is your y-axis. If we go up 4, that 2 turns into that 6, which totally makes sense. And then 0 to the right 5 is going to turn that x value into 5. Last step, draw a straight line through both points. You're going to take your ruler and you're going to draw through both points, and then you will have, oops, I just moved the whole thing too. You're going to have a beautiful graph. So notice that I go through. I also try to extend it to the edge of the graph paper, and then don't forget your arrows because it is a line, not a line segment. So pause the video, try it. You can quickly look at my final answer, and if you have the final answers, you don't have to listen to how I did the try it. If you don't get the answer, or you're still not understanding, go ahead and listen through the try it to see that you can do it. So the try it here is we're going to sketch the graph of y equals -3/4 x minus 5. So again, if we set this up, y equals mx plus 5. Plus b, so mx plus b. So your slope is -3/4, and your y-intercept is -5. So remember, the first step, as I wrote here, is to identify the y-intercept. So the y-intercept in this case is a -5. Remember that the sign goes with the number. So that means I'm going to plot the point 0, -5. So here's 0 down to -5. That is my y-intercept. That is the first point I will plot. Second point I plot is the slope. Okay, so I'm going to use that slope. And up here, notice it says -3/4. So notice the -3 goes with the vertical. And then the 4 is your horizontal. So this is my vertical movement. This is my horizontal movement. So I said start at 0, -5, which is your y-intercept, and you're going to move 3 units down because it's a negative vertical change, which means you're going to go down, and then 4 units to the right. And notice this is always going to be positive, because if this value, if the vertical change is negative and the horizontal change is negative, we know that a negative over a negative would be a positive. So that denominator, or that horizontal change, will never be negative. So we're going to go ahead and count that out. I'm going to move where I put that point. Oops. So we can see a little bit better. So we're going to go down those 3. 1, 2, 3. And then to the right, to the right 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's my point. So down 3, over to the right 4. You get your ruler out. and then you're going to make your straight line with your ruler through those 2 points and with your arrows at the end. Again, if you kind of look at the points, remember this is at 0, 5, and if I'm going to have a vertical change of -3, which means this is my y value because that's what's changing the y's, is go down 3, so I should have been at -8 for my y, and then to the right 4, so 4, -8, and I can quickly look, that's where it is. So I can also just use the idea of math of vertical change and horizontal change if I don't want to sit there and count out the spaces. So example number 2, we're going to go backwards. So they give us a graph, they want us to give us the equation. So this one's titled Write an Equation from a Graph. So step 1, it's going to be opposite what we just did. We're going to find the slope first between 2 points on the line. So this one's kind of drawn out for you already, but I'll walk you through it here. So here's 2 points on the line. Notice I can't pick that point because it's not on a line, or I couldn't pick that point or that point. So it's got to be 2 nice points on the line. They chose 0, 1, and 4, -2. So vertical change, you got to start, remember, at the y-intercept. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, and then the horizontal movement, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So my vertical change, because I went down, would be a -2, and my horizontal change, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Let's go back here. The vertical change was a -3, went down 1, 2, and 3, and then the vertical change is 4. So my slope is -3/4. And that's a good sign because notice it's a negative slope. If you're standing up here and you're looking down the slope, you're going to go downhill. Okay, so it should be a negative. Also, just to mention mathematically, this triangle that you make is called a slope triangle because it's what helps find the slope. The other way you could do it, if you're not fond of counting points, is you're going to pick those 2 points that you picked out. So in this case, it was 0, 1, and 4, -2. Actually, I'm going to write those next to each other. So 4, -2. And then you're going to use this equation. So the change of the y, so y2 minus y1 over the change of the x's, which is x2 minus x1. So this is x1, this is y1, this is x2, this is y2, and you just follow the equation as is. So y2 is -2 minus y1 is 1, and I'm going to put that over x2, in this case is 4, minus x1, which is 0. So just doing the math, -2, and you're taking away 1 more would be -3, and 4 minus 0 is 4. Same answer, just 2 different methods. So you can decide which method you enjoy going through the most. Second step is just to find the y-intercept. Easiest step. If you have a graph, you are just going to look at the graph and see it. So I can see that the point is 0, 1. So that means that my y-intercept is 1. Okay, so my slope is up here on top, and maybe I should have said that. Make sure everybody sees that. Slope here was -3/4. No matter which method you chose, the y-intercept is 1. The last part is just fill in the blanks. So our equation is y equals mx plus b. I'm going to fill in a number for m. In this case was -3/4. I'm going to fill in a value for b, which was 1, and then remember your y and x are as is because those are the variables of this problem and every problem. X variable and the y variables, these will always stay. Okay, again, stop it, try it, and then look to see what the answer is. If you get it right, awesome. You don't have to listen to my explanation. If you get it wrong or you don't understand it yet, listen to my explanation again. Okay, so the try it. So here's my graph. It picked out 2 points, this point here and this point here. Notice that would not be a good point because you really just can't tell me what those ordered pairs are. Either would here. So these are your 2 best bets. So remember, the first step is we're going to find the slope. This is, again, when we want to write the equation. So vertical change over horizontal change. So vertical change, you always start from the y-intercept. So we go 1, 2, so it's 2. Notice that's what's right here. And then from that point, we go 1, 2, 3. Notice your slope triangle there. And notice that's what I have there. So your slope here is 2/3. Again, good choice, because if I'm standing here and I'm looking down my slope, actually I'm looking up my slope on this one, you're going to go uphill. It's a positive slope. Second step, or the second way you could do it, is you can just do your x1, y1, x2, y2, and then you just plug in your points. So notice I plugged in my y2, so 0 minus a -2, and then x2, 3 minus 0. So 0 minus a -2 is a +2, 3 minus 0 is 3. Same answer. I know my slope is 2/3. Find the y-intercept, easiest thing all day. I'm going to look at my y-axis. There's where my graph crosses the line. Voila, that point is 0, -2. And I didn't point out that point up here was 3, 0. That's where those 2 points came from, right there. So the y-intercept intersects at 0, -2. That makes my y-intercept -2. So because of that, you're just going to make your equation. I'll just write it off to the side so it's fast to see. So you go back, step 1, I found my slope, which was 2/3. Step 2, I found my y-intercept was -2. And so then y equals, remember y is always going to be there because that's a variable, the y-axis variable, and then x, which is the x-axis variable, and there you go. So y equals 2/3 x minus 2. Next problem. Problem 3. So problem 3 is that we're going to understand slope-intercept, but this time notice on the paper there's no graph. So we're going to have to do all that work from just 2 points. So the question is, how can you find the equation of a line that passes through 2 points if neither of them is the y-intercept? Consider the line that passes through the points -1, -2, 3, and 4. So again, 2 points, one of them is not the y-intercept, and this is the steps you would take. So step 1, you're going to find the slope. Again, whatever method you like. In particular, this one, we're going to have to use the equation because we don't have a graph to count off of. So remember, the equation is y2, and you subtract y1 over x2 minus x1. So if we come up here quick, I'm just going to call my first pair 1, and honestly, it doesn't matter which pair is which. You can make this one pair 2 and this one pair 1, but you have to have the x and y both the same pair number. So this is pair 1, and then this is going to be my pair 2. And I just usually just do it in order so I don't get confused. My y2 is 4. My y1 is -2. So I'm going to subtract a -2. On the bottom here, my x2 is 3. And I'm going to subtract my x1, which is -1. So understanding, if you subtract a negative, or in other words, take away a negative, it turns into positive. So this slope turns into 6/4, because 3 minus a -1, which is addition, so 3 plus 1, in other words. And I'm just going to reduce that down into 3/2. So my slope is a vertical change of 3 and a horizontal change of 2. Second step is you're going to have to use, so since there's not a y-intercept, you can't just say, and you don't have a graph to look at, you're going to have to use the slope in one of your points to find the y-intercept. It doesn't matter which point you use. I don't care. It does, because both of these are on the line, so both of us will help us get the y-intercept. So I'm just going to use the 2 positive ones. So what you do is you take your equation, y equals mx plus b. You're going to plug in what we know right now. And the key is we don't know b, so this is going to be our unknown right here. But we can plug everything else. We know something because our point that we're using is 3, 4. So we know 1x and we know a y. So my y is 4. I just found my slope, which is 3/2, and my x is 3. And then again, my unknown, because that's what we're looking for, is the y-intercept. So I'll do the math here. So 3/2 times 3 would give you 9/2. Well, that's one ugly 9. But 9/2 plus b equals 4. I'm going to run out of room. You want to get rid of 9/2, so you're going to subtract 9/2 from both sides. I'll run it over here. When you do that, you get -1/2 equals b. -1/2 equals b, because this would be 8/2 if you want to do the math mentally, and you subtract 9/2, which will leave you with 1/2 or -1/2 b. So good news, we know our slope up here. We know our y-intercept, so now we can make the equation easily. So we're just going to plug in what we know. So y equals mx plus b. Y, remember, stays as y because that's the variable for the y-axis. Slope up here is 3/2 x, and then plus, or actually I should probably, you can go plus a negative if you want to. I prefer just writing, instead of plus a negative, just minus 1/2. So that's my final answer. Y equals 3/2 x minus 1/2. Again, take these steps and stop the video and check it out and try to do it on your own, or watch it again because you're still confused. That way you're able to do your homework. So here's my equation. These are my 2 points. Notice that neither one of them is the y-intercept. So first step always is to find that slope. And the more you do this, the more efficient you come, and you don't need to, think, now what do I do next? You're just like, oh yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So here are my 2 points. Here's going to be my first point, 5, 4, and my second point is going to be -1, 6. I got to use this equation. And so I did 6 minus 4, and then -1 minus the 5, which is 2, 6. And actually the 6 is negative. Then I changed that to -1/3. So the slope is -1/3. Second step, you're going to use the slope in one point to find the y-intercept. So if you look right here, x is 5, y is 4. So I'm going to plug those in. So here's my 4y, 5x, and my lovely little slope. So -1/3 times 5 is -5/3. And then I add 5/3 to both sides, and I get 17/3. Again, if you want to change that into a mixed number, you're more than welcome. So slope is 17/3. No, I'm sorry. The slope is -1/3. The y-intercept is 17/3. So the last step is just to plug them in as is. So the slope is -1/3. The y-intercept is 17/3, and then the x and y just pull down. So here is the equation that would go through those 2 points. So if I would take this equation and put it on a graph, you would see the 2 points up here it crosses through, and then you could see many infinite amounts of points it crosses through. The final example we're going to go through is a storyline. So it's just interpreting the slope and the y-intercept from a storyline. So yes, it's cool we can find the y-intercept. Yes, it's cool we can find the slope. We haven't talked a lot about x-intercepts, but we will here in a second. But why? Why do we look for it? What is the point? Let's look at a storyline so that it actually can help us solve something. So it says, Allie received a gift card from her local coffee shop. Every time she goes to the shop, she gets a medium coffee. The graph shows the gift card balance at 2 points. How can Allie determine the number of medium coffee she can buy with the gift card if she does not know the original value of the card? So first of all, this is a linear function because it's a constant rate of change. Because Allie goes to the store, and every single time she goes to the store, she gets a medium-sized coffee. And we're going to assume it's the same exact coffee, no fancy extras put into it. So every time she walks there, medium-sized, so it's going to go down at a constant rate all the time. So that's why we're going to apply a linear equation to it. In this case, y equals mx plus b. What do I know? Well, I know there's 2 points. Okay, I got 2 and 1970. So I'm going to think about this. I'm going to look at my graph here. 2 is my x value. So if I look at the x-axis label, that means how many cups of coffee. So I could write 2 cups of coffee. Oops, coffee. And then the X, or the Y, is 1970. And I look off to the Y, and what it's labeled as is the gift card balance in dollars. So that means what's left on the card is $19.70. Okay. The other point I know, and it will be the exact same thing because it's the exact same X and Y axes. So I get the point 4 and 1440. So now I know that when she has 4 cups of coffee bought, she is going to have only $14. Sorry, $14.40 left on her gift card. Okay, so that's what I know. What I'm looking for is, the question is, how can Allie determine how many medium coffees she can buy with her gift card if she doesn't know the original? So I think that we're going to, since this is linear, it's going to help us to find the y-intercept. And if we can find the y-intercept, that means we can quickly find how much our lovely Allie had on her gift card to start with. So I think the first thing is we're going to use our slope because I can't find y-intercept because what's given is 2 points. So if I go back to problem 3 or example 3, when given 2 points, the first thing you always find is slope. So let's go ahead and find the slope, which then will help us find the y-intercept, which will give us our answer here. So our 2 points, I'll write them down a little nicer here. Sorry about my slappiness. It's hard to write with these little pens. This is x1, this is y1, this is x2, this is y2. So remember, it's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So this is to find our slope. I'll write that m equals. So our y2 is 1440. I'm going to take that away from 1970. And on the bottom, my x2 is 4. And I'm going to take that away from 2. And my result is negative 5.3 or $5.50 for 2 cups of coffee. And I'm going to reduce that even more down, and I'm going to get negative 2.65 cents over 1. So what does that mean? Just make sure our brains are working here. I now know that this is my, remember the change of the y. So if I'm looking at my y-axis, this is how much it goes down. This is how much it goes down every cup of coffee. So in other words, the coffee cost, that medium-sized coffee cost $2.65 per cup. Okay. Now, that's not really helping us because the goal here is I want to know how much I had at the beginning of this gift card, or Allie had at the beginning. So I'm going to use this information, this slope, to help me find my y-intercept. So I'm going to use this part over here. So remember, to find the y-intercept, when not given on the graph, and that's why we're using this technique, because there's not given on the graph, we can't tell. I could probably estimate if I took a straight line. I could probably guess. But math, we know we have to prove correctness. So I'm going to use the point, I think, 1970. This is my x, this is my y, so I'm going to plug in 1970. My slope again is negative $2.65 per 1 cup of coffee. I'm going to multiply that times 2 coffees, which honestly I just did up here. So I get 1970 equals negative 530 plus b. Again, we're getting closer. I want to figure out what b is. So I'm going to add $5.30 to this side, add $5.30 to this side, which mathematically makes sense because this is 2 coffees sitting here. So if I want to go back to the original, I'm going to add that back to what the balance was. So quickly add this. I get 25 equals b. So go back to the question here so we can interpret. There it goes. How can Allie determine how many medium coffees she has if she does not know the original? So we know this answer. We know the original on the card. The card had $25. We also know, so we could probably write that, the gift card. Oh, I'm just making a mess of this. Was $25 at the start. So now we're going to answer that question. It just doesn't want me to get rid of that. Well, that's fun. Anyway, the question is how many cups of coffee? So mathematically, and we're going to get away from slope and y-intercept. We're just going to mathematically think of this. If I have $25 and each cup equals $6.25, then I'm going to take 25 and divide it by $2.65. And that is going to give me the value of how many cups of coffee, which it actually does not come out even. So I'll put approximately 9.433 and so forth. So how many cups of coffee is our final question? She can buy, if this is what exactly the answer is, she can't buy 10 because she only has enough for 9.433. And of course, you can't sell 43 or 433 thousandths of a cup. So Allie can buy 9 cups of medium size coffee. Okay, last question. In the tryout, that's hard to read. But again, pause it, check it out. This one might be a little more interesting because you don't know y-intercept. So if you just want to stay on and listen, otherwise you can pause me, try it yourself, and then check to see if you have the right answer. So the triad, it talks about the y-intercept. So if we think about a graph here, I'll just make a quick graph. So my y-intercept in this problem was 0, 25. That's how much money. The x-intercept, just like it would make sense, would cross on the x-axis. So right here. Now mathematically, I showed that on this work here, how you can find the y-intercept. So if you think about 0 for the x when you find the y-intercept, well, when you find the x-intercept, y is 0. So that's what I wrote. Okay, so if I'm going to solve this, I can take that equation. Notice I have my slope in there from the previous problem. I have my y-intercept from the previous problem. I'm going to subtract 25 from both sides. I'm going to divide by my slope of negative $2.65, and I still get that same answer, which shouldn't shock you. So the y-intercept is technically 9.433. That means, as we talked before, that's how much coffee she could buy if you could buy partial of a coffee. Hopefully this helps you. Please, please, please get on a Google Meet if you're confused. I will walk you through the problems. I can pull up a sheet of paper like this on my computer, and I can just go through it with you, talk you through it, write down what I'm talking about, and I will help you get through your Math Excel because you still will have a quiz. So if you have questions, you have to ask. So if you don't want to see my beautiful face on a Google Meet, you can email me and I can write it out, take a picture and send it back. I am here to help you. I am sorry I'm not at school. I would love to be there. But again, if you need my help, get on a Google Meet, email me. Remember, this is your education and you need to do what you need to do to get this figured out. So good luck on your Math Excel. And I will see you. Well, actually, I will talk to you on the next lesson.